The first thing Ethan Carter noticed wasn't the marble floors or the expensive artwork. It was the way people looked through him. At exactly 7:15 on a cold Monday morning, employees streamed into Carter Global's headquarters carrying designer coffee cups, expensive briefcases, and talking about million-dollar contracts. Nobody paid any attention to the young man pushing a gray janitor's cart across the polished lobby. His uniform looked faded. His shoes were old and worn. A small name tag on his chest simply read, Ethan. To everyone inside that building, he was just the new janitor, someone hired to clean up after people they believed were more important. That was exactly what Ethan wanted, because Ethan Carter wasn't a janitor. He was the only son of the company's late founder, and the man who owned 51% of Carter Global. After spending 4 years studying business and leadership in Boston, Ethan had returned with one mission. Before becoming CEO, he wanted to know what kind of people actually worked inside his father's company, who respected others, who abused their power, and who deserved to remain. So instead of arriving in a black limousine, he walked through the front door wearing a janitor's uniform. Every smile, every insult, every act of kindness would be remembered. As Ethan quietly swept near the reception desk, the sharp sound of high heels echoed across the marble floor. A woman in a perfectly tailored navy blue suit stopped directly in front of him. She never looked at his face, only at the mop in his hands. You, why is this floor still dirty? Her voice was cold enough to silence the lobby. Several employees immediately glanced over. Everyone recognized her. Melissa Grant, Regional Operations Manager, one of the most feared people in the company. Ethan calmly lowered his eyes. I'm sorry, ma'am. I'll clean it again. Melissa folded her arms. Louder, Ethan repeated. I'll clean it again. A small smile appeared on her face. Good. Know your place. She turned and walked away without another word. A few employees laughed quietly. One whispered to another, the new janitor won't survive his first week. Another chuckled. They always hire people like this. Ethan kept sweeping. He never looked up, but inside, he had already memorized Melissa Grant's name. Every insult, every laugh, every face, because this wasn't his first day as a janitor. It was the first day of an investigation, one that would change every life inside Carter Global. Hook. That morning, Melissa believed she had humiliated an ordinary janitor. She had absolutely no idea. She had just insulted the man who owned the company. By lunchtime, Ethan had already learned more about Carter Global than he had from months of reading company reports. The reports spoke about teamwork. The employees practiced something very different. Inside the executive break room, laughter echoed across the tables. Ethan quietly pushed his janitor's cart inside and began emptying the trash bins. Nobody stopped talking. To them, he wasn't a person. He was furniture. A young accountant glanced at Ethan and smirked. Hey, be careful around my shoes. They cost more than your monthly paycheck. The table burst into laughter. Another employee looked Ethan up and down. I bet this guy has never even been inside a real restaurant. Someone else added, don't worry. If he works hard enough, maybe one day he can afford a decent pair of shoes. More laughter. Ethan simply nodded. Sorry, I'll be careful. As he continued replacing the trash bags, he listened instead of speaking. People always revealed their true character when they believed no one important was listening. One manager openly mocked another department. A supervisor bragged about taking credit for someone else's work. Someone joked about firing older employees because they were too slow. Ethan remembered every single name, every single face. Then, something unexpected happened. An older janitor slowly entered the break room, carrying another cleaning cart. His hair was almost completely gray. His back was slightly bent. His name tag read, Walter. Unlike everyone else, Walter smiled at Ethan. First day, Ethan smiled back. Yeah. Walter nodded kindly. It gets easier. Don't let people like this change who you are. Before Ethan could answer, Melissa suddenly walked into the room. She looked around. Then her eyes landed on Walter. You again? I told you yesterday those windows weren't cleaned properly. Walter looked confused. I cleaned every one of them, ma'am. Melissa crossed her arms. Are you calling me a liar? Walter immediately lowered his head. No, ma'am. I'm sorry. I'll do them again. She stepped closer. You've worked here for 17 years. And somehow you're still the slowest janitor in the building. Several employees looked away. Not one person defended him. Melissa turned and walked out. The room became silent. Walter quietly picked up his cleaning supplies without saying another word. Ethan followed him into the hallway. You didn't do anything wrong. Walter smiled sadly. Sometimes proving you're right isn't worth losing your job. My wife is sick. I can't afford to be unemployed. Those words hit Ethan harder than any insult he'd received all morning. This man had spent nearly 2 decades serving the company, and this was how they treated him. Walter reached into his lunch bag. Inside was a simple peanut butter sandwich. He broke it in half. Here, you look hungry. Ethan stared at him. You don't have to do that. Walter smiled. I've been the new guy before. I know what it feels like. For the first time that day, Ethan struggled to hide his emotions. The richest man in the building was being fed by the poorest. Hook. That afternoon, Ethan made a silent promise. If he ever became CEO, the very first promotion in Carter Global would belong to Walter. The next morning, Ethan arrived even earlier than usual. At 6:30 a.m., the building was almost empty. Only the security guards, the cleaning crew, and a few maintenance workers had arrived. As Ethan cleaned the executive hallway, he noticed something unusual. Melissa stepped out of the finance department carrying a thick folder. She looked around before quickly slipping several documents into her designer handbag. The office wasn't even open yet. Why was she removing company files before business hours? Ethan pretended not to notice, but the question stayed in his mind. A few hours later, the entire office suddenly erupted into chaos. The finance director rushed out of his office looking furious. Everyone stop what you're doing. We have a serious problem. Within seconds, employees gathered around. The signed contract for the Morgan Investments project is missing. The original file disappeared this morning. If we don't recover it today, we could lose a $25 million client. The room fell silent. Melissa immediately took control. No one leaves this floor. We're checking everyone. One by one, employees opened their bags. Some looked nervous. Others looked annoyed. Then Melissa's eyes landed on Ethan. Search him. 2 security guards walked toward him. One guard opened Ethan's old backpack. Inside, there were only work gloves, a bottle of water, and half of Walter's sandwich from yesterday. Nothing else. Melissa frowned. Fine. Keep looking. Just then, a young receptionist raised her hand. Wait. I saw Walter walking near the finance department this morning. The room instantly turned toward the elderly janitor. Walter looked shocked. I wasn't inside. I was only emptying the trash. Melissa didn't hesitate. There it is. I knew something wasn't right. She pointed directly at him. You've been here for years. You know where everything is. Walter's face turned pale. I swear, I didn't take anything. Melissa's voice became louder. Then explain why you were there. Walter struggled to answer. I clean that hallway every morning. It has always been part of my route. But nobody listened. The whispers began immediately. I knew it. Old people get desperate. He probably wanted money. Walter's hands started shaking. He looked completely helpless. Ethan watched everything in silence. Something didn't make sense. If Walter had stolen the contract, why would he still be calmly cleaning the hallway? And why had Melissa accused him so quickly? Without asking a single question, Ethan quietly glanced toward the hallway security camera. It pointed directly at the finance department entrance. Someone had recorded everything. He lowered his head and continued mopping the floor. But inside, a completely different plan had already begun. Hook. While everyone was accusing Walter, Ethan had just realized the security camera had captured the real thief. That night, long after the last employee had gone home, Ethan quietly returned to the office. The security guard at the front desk smiled. Working late, Ethan held up his mop. Looks like it. The guard laughed and waved him through. Inside, the building was almost silent. Only the hum of the air conditioning echoed through the empty hallways. Ethan made his way toward the security office. He had spent the last 3 days earning the guard's trust. They saw him as nothing more than a hardworking janitor. That made tonight much easier. One of the guards looked up from his monitor. "Can you do me a favor? I forgot my coffee downstairs." Ethan smiled. "I'll watch the desk." "Go ahead." The guard thanked him and left. The moment the door closed, Ethan sat in front of the surveillance system. His fingers moved confidently across the keyboard. Years of studying cybersecurity suddenly became useful. He pulled up the footage from 6 a.m. The finance department hallway appeared on the screen. Walter entered first, exactly as he had said. He emptied the trash, changed the liner, then walked away. He never touched the office door. Ethan kept watching. 3 minutes later, Melissa appeared. She looked around carefully, then unlocked the finance department with her manager's keycard. She walked inside, carrying an empty leather folder. Less than a minute later, she came back out, but this time, the folder looked much thicker. She smiled, locked the door, and disappeared down the hallway. Ethan replayed the footage. Again and again, there was no doubt. Walter had been telling the truth. Melissa had entered the office before anyone else. She was the last person seen with the missing contract. Just then, the office door suddenly creaked open. The security guard returned with his coffee. Ethan quickly minimized the video. "Everything okay?" the guard asked. Ethan smiled. "Quiet night." The guard nodded. "That's how I like them." A few minutes later, Ethan left the security office. But he wasn't smiling anymore. He finally had proof. Real proof. Not rumors. Not guesses. Evidence. As he walked through the empty lobby, he looked up at the giant bronze plaque hanging on the wall. It carried his father's words. "Character is revealed when no one important is watching." Ethan whispered to himself. "You were right, Dad. The company doesn't have a business problem. It has a leadership problem." He slipped a flash drive containing the surveillance footage into his pocket. Tomorrow, everything would begin to change. Hook. Melissa believed the missing contract had destroyed Walter's life. She had no idea. The security cameras had just destroyed hers. The next morning, no one noticed Ethan smiling. He pushed his janitor's cart through the lobby exactly as he had every day. Melissa walked past him without even looking. "Make sure my office is spotless. I don't want to see a single fingerprint on my desk." "Yes, ma'am." She disappeared into the elevator. Exactly 20 minutes later, the weekly executive meeting began. Department heads filled the conference room. Melissa sat confidently near the front. She looked completely relaxed, as if nothing had happened. The finance director stood up. "We've completed our initial investigation. We still haven't recovered the missing contract." Melissa slowly shook her head. "It's unfortunate, but sometimes employees betray the people who trust them." She looked directly at Walter. Walter sat quietly in the back of the room. His hands were folded together. He looked exhausted. The HR director cleared his throat. "Until we finish the investigation, Walter Harris is suspended without pay." The old janitor slowly stood up. His voice trembled. "I've worked here for 17 years. I've never stolen anything. I've never even received a warning. I don't deserve this." No one answered. Walter quietly picked up his old lunch bag. He was about to leave. Then, the conference room doors opened. Everyone turned around. It was Ethan, still wearing the same faded janitor uniform. Melissa frowned. "What are you doing here?" "This meeting is for management only." Ethan looked at her calmly. "I know. I'm only here to return something." He walked to the center of the room, then placed a small black flash drive on the conference table. The room became silent. Melissa folded her arms. "And what's that supposed to be?" Ethan smiled. "The truth." The finance director looked confused. "What do you mean?" Ethan answered. "The security footage from yesterday morning." Melissa's expression changed instantly. For the first time, she looked nervous. The IT manager plugged the flash drive into the conference room computer. The video appeared on the large screen. Everyone watched in complete silence. First, Walter entered the hallway. He emptied the trash. Then he walked away. The video continued. Exactly 3 minutes later, Melissa appeared. She unlocked the finance department, walked inside, came out carrying a thicker folder, then quickly looked around before hiding it inside her handbag. The room fell completely silent. No one spoke. No one moved. Melissa's face lost all color. She whispered, That's not what it looks like." The finance director paused the video, then slowly turned toward her. It looks exactly like theft. Hook. Melissa thought she had destroyed an innocent man's life. She never imagined the janitor would be the one to expose her in front of the entire executive team. Nobody in the conference room said a word. The video had answered every question. Walter had been telling the truth. Melissa had lied to everyone. The HR director slowly closed his notebook. Melissa Grant, do you have anything you'd like to say? Her lips trembled. This is a misunderstanding. I only removed the contract because I wanted to review it. The finance director looked at her in disbelief. Then why did you report it as stolen? Melissa couldn't answer. The room fell silent again. For the first time in years, the woman who had always controlled every meeting had completely lost control. The chairman finally spoke. Melissa Grant, you are terminated effective immediately, and the company's legal department will begin a full investigation. Security quietly entered the room. Melissa looked around desperately. Nobody defended her. Not one person. The same employees who had laughed at Ethan now avoided looking at her. As she walked toward the door, she stopped in front of Ethan. You planned this. Ethan calmly shook his head. No, you planned it yourself. You just never expected someone to tell the truth. Melissa lowered her head. Without another word, she walked out. The conference room remained completely silent. Then Ethan slowly turned toward Walter. The old janitor was still standing near the door. He looked completely overwhelmed. Ethan walked over to him. I'm sorry. Walter looked confused. You have nothing to apologize for. Ethan smiled. I do. My father built this company. I should have protected people like you much sooner. Walter's eyes filled with tears. I never wanted revenge. I only wanted someone to believe me. Ethan extended his hand. Starting today, you'll never carry another mop. Everyone looked at Ethan. He continued. Walter Harris, I'd like to offer you the position of Employee Relations Director. The room gasped. Walter shook his head. I've never managed people. Ethan smiled. Exactly. You spent 17 years respecting people. That's a much harder skill to learn. For the first time, Walter smiled with confidence. 3 days later, every employee received an email. It contained only one sentence. Every person deserves the same respect, regardless of their job title. Below it was a new company policy. Executives would spend 1 day each month working alongside janitors, security guards, cafeteria workers, and maintenance staff. Not as managers, but as teammates. Some employees complained. Most stayed silent. But over the following months, something incredible happened. People stopped looking down at the cleaning staff. Employees started learning their names. The culture slowly changed. On Ethan's first official day as CEO, he entered the building wearing an expensive suit. Everyone stood to greet him. As he walked through the lobby, he noticed a new janitor struggling with a heavy trash cart. Without saying a word, Ethan took one side of the cart. The young janitor looked surprised. Sir, you don't have to do that. Ethan smiled. My father once told me, the easiest way to judge a leader is by how they treat the person nobody else notices. Then the two of them pushed the cart together across the same marble floor where this story had first begun.